The fog hung like a burial shroud over the frontier as a stranger with haunted eyes stepped off the boat onto American soil. The year was 1840, and Albert Pfeiffer, German blood in his veins, not Dutch as many incorrectly claim, was about to carve his name into the savage story of the West. While others dreamed of gold, Pfeiffer hungered for something else entirely as he pushed deeper into the untamed wilderness, finally binding himself to a powerful Mexican family through marriage and blood. Destiny came calling in the form of Kit Carson, the legendary frontiersman whose shadow stretched across the territories. Pfeiffer, 20 years Carson's junior, became the Ute tribe's sub-agent, but this was merely the opening chapter of a blood-soaked saga. When war erupted between North and South, both men donned the blue uniform of the New Mexico Volunteers. Their bond forged in gunpowder and loyalty amid the chaos of battle. But it was at Canyon de Chelly where Pfeiffer's name would be whispered with both awe and terror. The towering red walls witnessed horrors as he led men against the Navajo in a campaign that still echoes through history. Some called it necessary, others named it massacre. Pfeiffer never flinched from either judgment. History remembers their friendship, Pfeiffer's granddaughter Pauline Nelson would later write, her words scraping at the truth. But few understood the depth of what bound these men together. Military archives document their constant companionship, but the yellowed pages can't capture what these men witnessed together. The blood, the treaties broken like bones, the harsh justice of frontier law. Theirs was no casual alliance, but a brotherhood written in the language only warriors understand. A pact between officers who carried the terrible burden of taming a wilderness that refused to be broken. Albert Pfeiffer was a warrior, whose most lethal weapon was his own naked fury. The year was 1863, the scorching New Mexico sun beating down on El Ojo del Muerto, the spring of the dead, a name that would prove darkly prophetic. Pfeiffer, weakened by illness, had come seeking healing waters with his pregnant wife, adopted daughter, and a handful of soldiers. None suspected the Apache war party watching from the shadows, counting heartbeats until the perfect moment to strike. Chaos erupted without warning. As screams shattered the desert calm, Pfeiffer emerged from the waters, completely naked, to witness his nightmare unfold. His soldiers fell in crimson splashes. His pregnant wife and daughter vanished in a cloud of dust and war cries. There was no time for clothes, no moment for dignity. Dripping wet and armed with nothing but a rifle and primal rage, Pfeiffer charged after the Apache raiders, his bare feet tearing against the merciless terrain. The arrow struck him with a sickening thud, entering his back and punching through his chest. Most men would have collapsed, surrendered to death. Not Pfeiffer. With the shaft still impaling him, its bloody tip protruding from his front like some grotesque ornament, he continued his desperate pursuit. Only when his strength finally betrayed him did he stagger into a natural stone fortress, his naked body slick with mingled water, sweat, and blood. Pfeiffer made his stand there, a nude, arrow-pierced sentinel, defying death itself as he fought to reclaim what the Apache had stolen. This wouldn't be his last battle fought in nothing but his skin, but it forever marked him as a frontier legend whose savagery matched the untamed land itself. The naked, arrow-pierced figure that stumbled into Fort McRae was barely recognizable as Albert Pfeiffer. Blood crusted his sun-blistered skin, each footprint behind him a crimson stamp in the desert sand. The soldiers who found him stared in disbelief, not just at his nakedness, but at the impossible fact he still drew breath with an arrow transfixing his torso. What happened in the surgeon's quarters would have killed most men. When the military doctor yanked the arrow from Pfeiffer's flesh, the sun-scorched skin surrounding the wound came off with it. Pfeiffer's screams echoed through the fort as agony consumed him. For 2 months he hovered in that gray territory between life and death, fever dreams filled with visions of his pregnant wife and daughter in Apache hands. But death rejected Albert Pfeiffer. When he finally rose from that bed, scarred, transformed, and burning with a cold purpose, the Apaches gained something they hadn't counted on. A personal nemesis with nothing left to lose. No longer just a soldier or scout, Pfeiffer became vengeance incarnate. His recovery wasn't a healing, but a metamorphosis into something terrifying. What began that day wasn't merely a campaign or military operation. It was Pfeiffer's one-man war, a blood vendetta against an entire people who had taken everything from him. The Apache would soon learn his name and speak it with dread around their campfires, never knowing when or where this demon-touched white man would strike next. The Colorado chieftain painted a chilling portrait of Pfeiffer's metamorphosis in their June 1871 edition. It was a bad day for the Apaches when they killed old Pfeiffer's family. What followed was a one-man reign of terror as Pfeiffer vanished into Apache territory for months at a time, returning with a disturbing satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. More unsettling still were his companions, half a dozen wolves that shadowed him like spectral guardians. "They like me," Pfeiffer once remarked with hollow humor, "because they're fond of dead Indian, and I feed them well." With grief hardened into lethal purpose, Pfeiffer joined Kit Carson just 6 months after losing his family. Together, they unleashed the infamous Scorched-Earth Campaign against the Navajo, a brutal offensive that earned Pfeiffer promotion to brevet lieutenant colonel and cemented his reputation as a man who collected enemies, like others collected trinkets. Yet for all his hatred of certain tribes, Pfeiffer maintained an unbreakable bond with the Ute. This loyalty would thrust him into legend when conflict erupted over the sacred hot springs near present-day Pagosa Springs, Colorado. After days of bloodshed between Ute and Navajo, Pfeiffer engineered a solution as ancient as warfare itself. Trial by combat, one champion from each side, fighting to the death to determine ownership. The Navajo selected their mightiest warrior. The Utes chose Pfeiffer, or perhaps he chose himself. The truth lost to time, like so much frontier history. What happened next has been disputed, but the tale persists. Both men stripped naked, armed only with Bowie knives. But when the Navajo champion beheld Pfeiffer's scarred body, a topographic map of violence survived. Psychological warfare had already won the battle. The springs remained in Ute hands, and Pfeiffer's legend grew taller. When military life ended, Pfeiffer followed Carson to Colorado's San Luis Valley, eventually settling near Del Norte. By 1881, death finally claimed what countless enemies couldn't, taking the 58-year-old in his bed rather than in battle. His body bore the evidence of a life written in violence, 17 distinct scars from bullets and blades. Historian Jim Perkins perhaps said it best, that Pfeiffer dying peacefully in bed rather than bleeding out among cactus and rocks in some lonely place constituted its own kind of frontier miracle. For a man who made war in the nude and kept wolves as companions, perhaps this quiet end was the most surprising chapter of all.